Hey, this is Harry, and you're listening to the Litt Podcast, a show where we speak with New York City event hosts and their stories. This week, I'm speaking with Miguel Molina, a UX professional, about his work in the industry. Welcome.
Hey, Harry, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate you hosting this.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you were able to make the time. So, could you tell me a little bit more about what you? So, we're going to get to the event that you host, but maybe tell me a little bit more about your background and kind of like how the whole story before you started working at General Assembly?
Sure, yeah. So I'm a designer, an instructor, and an entrepreneur. So really, everything goes all the way back to high school, where I took this really random JavaScript class where, to be honest with you, I didn't learn any bit of JavaScript, but they taught us the basics of building a website. And from that point on, I was really just obsessed with all things design and web and technology, and I became really fascinated by tech in general. So from there, I studied computer science. I studied human-computer interaction. So I've been really deep in this space of computers, human operation and design, a little bit of psychology. So that background led me to user experience design, and working in UX so long led me to teaching it at General Assembly. So for those that are listening and are not too familiar with GA, GA is a boot camp. So for people who want to learn things like user experience design or front-end development or digital marketing, project management, things like that, you can go to a boot camp like program like General Assembly. There's others as well. But the GA specific one, the way that they do it is they have full-time or part-time 10-week boot camps. So specifically, I teach the 10-week part-time boot camp for user experience design. And yeah, I've been doing that for over a year now. I've been doing UX for over 5 years now, and I've been contributing to the web by building digital products for over, I think, 8 years now. So some time in this space, but I'm super excited to continue teaching and continue to adapt to these really crazy times that we're all living in.
For our audience members that maybe are not in the like technology industry, could you explain what UX means and why is that like useful? What's that for?
For sure. Yeah, that's a great place to start. I should have mentioned that myself. So UX specifically is relatively new, but the idea of designing software is not. So, and when I say new, I mean in the mainstream. So the place that I usually go to start explaining this is by using the example of your phone. So we all have a phone. We all use websites, for example, but let's say the phone specifically. So everyone has a phone in their pocket, and everyone has apps that they use on their phone, right? So maybe it's Instagram, maybe it's this or that. It doesn't matter. All of those apps were built by someone, and I feel like that's where everyone's mind goes at first. So you think about who made the app in terms of code, but there's a whole other side to making an app or making a digital product that people don't think about or assume as naturally, and that is the design part of it. So before a developer gets into writing the code to bring that app to life, there is a group of people that get together and design everything from the features to the functionality to the look and feel to the operation from beginning to end. So every single crevice of every single app or website or digital experience is thought out by user experience practitioners. So the people that, like I said, focus on the features, the functionality, look and feel, et cetera, et cetera. But this is something that happens before any code is even written. And so that is
Yeah, I was gonna say that I think most people's conception of like how technology works or like how an app is made is that like from the social network, like Facebook's a social network, and they just imagine that Zuckerberg just, or someone like Zuckerberg just like makes an app one day and that's what programming is. But it's actually quite, it's often not the case. It's often, if you want something that's like well designed, like Instagram, they have like a really like world class UX people, and they work together with like someone that's like a programmer.
It's funny you bring that up about the social network, because those are the type of things that people think about when they're trying to connect back to building digital products, whether it's a website or an app, and the social network being one of the biggest examples. And by the way, that's one of my favorite movies too. But
Yeah, typical.
exactly, no surprise there. But to be honest with you, like that is a great example, because it quickly just highlighted how he was in his dorm room and just wrote a bunch of code, and then poof, like there, Facebook was born and the UI came out of nowhere. But like you said, right before that, there is a huge part of the process where there's a group of people that is thinking through every single corner of the potential interface. And like you said, if you want to build something that's of high quality, this is a step that you're going to spend a lot of time focusing on. So even going back to like a website and away from an app example, even a website, anyone can build a website, anyone can think about how a website can look like. But if we want to build something that's going to make people really appreciate that experience, have a pleasant experience, and potentially get them to keep coming back, we want to spend a lot of time focusing on the quality of the experience and the flow from beginning to end.
Okay. So you studied HCI, human computer interaction in university, and you've been teaching at General Assembly the user experience course, UX course. Did you teach that pre-COVID? And how has COVID and the need to social distance how has that affected the way you teach this class?
For sure, yeah. So I started teaching early 2019, and I was really excited to teach because I've always wanted to teach UX, because I felt that UX should be taught differently. And so teaching in person allowed me to really go through with that. So what I mean by that is UX is entirely about focusing on the user and that user's experience, and providing a relevant experience to that person. And so I felt that teaching UX should reflect those principles. So it shouldn't be just a mundane classroom experience. It should be something that's exciting and that reflects the excitement of the industry. So that's really how I went into teaching, and that was my ethos going into going in front of the classroom. And so teaching in person really allowed me to bring that idea in the classroom to life, or those ideas in the classroom to life. And so I would do things like really crazy things like bring wine in the classroom, which probably shouldn't be saying that, or like bring tacos in the classroom, or just do fun things that make the classroom seem less like a rigid experience, and make it seem fun and exciting, and show by doing, not just teach by explaining definitions that may or may not stick with the students. So that has been my entire perspective in front of the classroom. And so when we had to, I say all of that to say that when we had to pivot to online, I was like, oh man, how am I gonna reflect those ideals in a virtual setting? The energy from a human to human perspective isn't there anymore. We can't connect as we would in person. How am I going to do that? And so GA decided to continue providing our classes, but except we would do them online. And so I was pretty nervous at first, but I ended up spending a lot of time thinking about how we could replicate as best as we could that energy and that excitement and that vibe that I was trying to produce in person, online, and I'm sure we'll talk about it, soon. But it's turned out to be way better than I thought it was going to be. I was very apprehensive going into it, but yeah, COVID has for sure, switched things up for me, for us. From going in person to now online, and even for the students, some of my students from my last class, they signed up for an in-person class, and we were like, just kidding, now we have to do this online, and it's not our fault, it's not their fault, but it's definitely an adjustment, but it has
Yeah.
turned out better than I thought.
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of, I don't want to say fiasco, a lot of controversy about like people, students at higher education institutions and the cost of that, right? So if they're spending $30,000, it's been very hard for the universities to adjust, because they have to somehow convince people in the short term that yes, they should continue paying $30,000 for what is a virtual experience, but then they're going to have to go backtrack on that in about 2 or 3 years when there's no longer such an issue with coronavirus. They'll have to kind of backtrack and say, okay, so like now the in-person experience, college experience, is still worth $40,000. That's something that they are going to have to deal with. General Assembly is not quite as expensive, from what I understand, than something like a Harvard or what have you. Has there been that sort of sense that yes, we need to adapt to virtual events, but then how are we going to justify the cost in the future? Has there been any discussions about that?
That's a good point that you bring that up. And before I answer your question directly, I would say that I think that's the inherent value proposition that a GA brings, right? So, it's a focused curriculum on something that you want to learn about, and it's not as costly as that other commitment might be. However, I do think that there is the question of the kind of experience that you are paying for and the kind of experience that you expected to have. And so this situation has made that, something that we have to adapt to. And it's no longer the case. You may have paid for an in-person experience and now you're getting an online one, right? But I haven't been part of any specific conversations at the leadership level, but at the instructor level, I can tell you that my students, they obviously would have preferred, I can say, being taught in person, but I really think it depends on the commitment of the instructor, or in general of the event host. So it is totally possible to have the same energy. You may not be able to replicate it 100%, but you can bring elements of in-person energies in a virtual setting. And
Yeah, I'd love to, like you mentioned that when your philosophy as a teacher, it sounded like for the in-person classes, you were trying to keep it fun with bringing tacos in and bringing wine in. Can you maybe share something concrete that you have tried to incorporate into the virtual class that is to keep it fun like this?
absolutely. So, I mean, it's obviously impossible for me to bring in tacos in a virtual classroom, right? So, something is impossible, which is fine.
You
Uh,
use an emoji.
you can use an emoji, or I can like get everyone's address and seamless them a taco delivery to their door, but that would probably be very expensive for me. But aside from sending an emoji, yeah, we do fun things. So I think in a classroom setting, the most important thing you can do is to get people involved in the conversation. So what I see a lot of current instructors doing online is they're just talking for 30 or 45 or 60 minutes or 2 hours if it's a 2-hour lecture to their students, and they're not bringing those students as a part of the conversation. Maybe you can think back to you when you were in school. The more engaging classes are the ones where you're participating in the class, even if you have nothing to participate from the standpoint of you don't understand the material. I'm not referring to that, but the classes where it was a conversation and the instructor brought you in. Those were the more interesting ones, right? So in a classroom setting, more so, if you're just talking at somebody for 60 or 90 or 120 minutes, you're going to lose them. They have other things in their Zoom. They can open up that messaging window and they can maybe, text people. If you want to keep people engaged, you need to bring them in. So it can be very simple things like, I will ask people to contribute to the conversation. Or we will utilize breakout rooms, the Zoom feature where you can break people out into smaller groups. I don't think enough people are utilizing that. Or it could be more, experimental things like we, after a couple of our classes, we had a happy hour where we sort of, got outside of that classroom setting and made it a little bit more dynamic and more relaxed and more casual. But it could also be things like, I asked my students to work on a project together in a breakout room, and then they'll come back out and present. And so that is very, very similar from having my students, get in groups and chairs in person and then presenting as a group. So just getting them not only talking to me in the classroom, but getting them talking to each other as much as that, socializing vibe is it possible that I can instill or keep in the classroom setting, regardless if it's virtual or not, I think is the key there. And it has been pretty successful for me.
Yeah. Well, that sounds really, really exciting. We wanted to touch on another one of your projects. So you have this other project called UX Come Up. Can you tell me more about what that is and why might someone be interested in attending UX Come Up?
Yeah, so you asked a good question earlier, right? You were like, well, what is UX first of all? So if you are, somebody who has that question in mind, so you're curious about UX, or if you are interested in UX and you're actually wanting to learn UX, or if you're just looking to come up in your, current UX career, that is what this community is for. So the UX Come Up is basically a community where we're speaking to all three of those audiences, offering as much UX content as possible, whether that's by our Instagram account or whether that's by our Meetup group where we're hosting events. So similar to what I was talking about with GA, we were hosting events in person. In fact, the event right before all of this started to happen, sorry in advance for the sirens.
It's fine. It's New York City.
Exactly. If you want to have an event in New York City, you're going to have to, hear sirens. So we had our most successful in-person event right before all of this happened. And we were so excited to keep that momentum going. We were like, great, 100 plus people. The next one might be 200. Eventually we'll have an event that's 500. And then the universe has a different plan, right? So the good thing though about hosting events in NYC or just virtually is that people are still really down to attend these things. There's still that appetite, not just to socialize, but to attend something. That energy is still there. So we quickly pivoted our strategy to virtual, and we were super shocked at how many people we were able to get in our virtual event. So now UXCU is more so, a community, but we are now more so focused on putting on virtual events to help people understand UX design, help people, grow in UX design, and also connect with each other. Again, making sure that sense of community is there as much as possible.
So UX Come Up, UXCU, what's the commitment here? So my understanding is that with General Assembly, you kind of have to get a couple of $1,000 to, and like a couple of months to do, correct me if I'm wrong, to do General Assembly. Is that the same case with UX Come Up?
Yeah, that's a good question. So first of all, I just want to say, because I forgot to say this at the beginning, but the UX Come Up, the name comes from, I don't know if you listen to hip hop or J. Cole at all, but
A little bit.
He has
J. Cole's from Queens. I know he went to Johns Hopkins, was it?
He went to St. John's.
St. John's, one of those.
Yeah, you knew the basics of it though. He went to Queens.
Yeah.
So you made that connection, but he has a mixtape series called it doesn't have a name, but the first mixtape in that series was the Come Up or the Warm Up, and then it was the Come Up. So I was like, oh, UX come up, that sounds cool. But
I know
anyway,
he was pushing Dreamville. That was a good album.
yeah, the Dreamville album was really good. I want him to drop some new heat really soon. Um, yeah, I'm definitely waiting on that. But yeah,
So
so
UX Come Up, you're a fan. You named the namesake of UX Come Up is a J. Cole song.
yeah, so it's a reference to his mixtape. So the which was the come up. So his come up, right? So I was like, oh, cool. Like, it's speaking to our target audience, those that are coming up in UX. So there's no commitment here. You can attend as many events as you want. They're all free, or you could not attend any of them, and you can just follow us on social or be in our Slack community. So that's another, I think, tip that I always share with people is if you have any type of community online, whether you are hosting virtual events and you're pivoting to this new world because of COVID, open up a workspace on Slack. So go to slack.com, make an account, make your own workspace, and invite all your people, all the people that are in your community into that workspace. So they have like a shared, chat network, so that they can connect with each other, because the stronger that the connections of your community members amongst themselves are, the stronger your community is in general, and the more pop-in your virtual events will be. But yeah, there's no commitment, as much commitment as you want to have. We're going to continue posting events every week or two. That has been our cadence. And if people make it, that's great. Some people make all of them. Some people make only one of them every now and then. But we just hope to be able to put as many of these events on as possible and provide as much value, because there's time and people want the content.
So it sounds like I actually haven't attended one of your UX Come Up events. It sounds like it's you organize it through meetup.com, and you can kind of like drop in, so it's not there, each one seems like self-contained. Um and what was I going to ask? And oh, what's the cost? What's the cost for these meetups, for the UX Come Up meetups?
Yeah, so it's all done through meetup.com. So far it has really served its purpose for us. I know that some people use Eventbrite, some people don't use either of them, and they may use another platform. But for us, the meetup.com platform has really served its purpose. And one of the things that I like about meetup.com is that, and I don't know if Eventbrite could do this, maybe it can, so it has nothing to do with being specific to Meetup at that point, but you can ask people questions before they join your Meetup group, which for us has been a really great information gateway to get our NOAA audience. So like we'll ask people when they join, where are you in your UX journey, or how did you hear about us? But if you fill out that little survey to join the UX meetup, $0, free 99, a special forever. We find that there should be no barrier to entry to these virtual communities. And if there's space to make some sort of ROI later on, I think that's great. But my recommendation would always be to have it be the lowest barrier to entry as possible, to grow that community first and foremost.
Okay, I mean, that's really exciting. So if people are curious about maybe transitioning to UX as a career, they should definitely come to one of these free, like, what do you have to lose? No money. These free virtual events to find out more about what is UX, what is like the day to day. They could probably ask you like, what is it like to work as a UX person? And you sort of use meetup.com to elicit feedback from the people, so you can be a little bit more data driven. And you're also suggesting that people join the Slack. And I think that's something that some of our audience may not be aware of. I know that when I talk to some people outside of, first of all, if they even know what Slack is, because that's still a fairly recent development. So Slack is like a team chat that certain companies use. And then B, some people are aware of Slack, but they are not aware of all the different communities other than their job, right? So a lot of people get really mind blown when I ask them, oh, are you part of this Slack or that Slack? And they're like, what do you mean? I just use it at work. So a lot of people, that's like the other thing to be aware of is that you can use Slack for non-work. You can use Slack for, as you said, Miguel, you can, if you have like a hobby or some sort of community you're trying to build up, you can use Slack to engage with them more. Have you ever looked at Discord? Because like Discord is something that's on my radar. I've recently started experimenting with the voice chat, especially during these like social distancing days.
I haven't, and that's although somebody has brought that to my attention recently that I should try to focus on that a bit. But just to really quickly go back to the Slack point, that's a really good the way that you described it is a really good way to explain it a little bit further. So Slack, to most people who are familiar with it, are familiar with it in the context of a workplace setting. But I would recommend for anyone that has any kind of community, like you said, even if it's a hobby or even if you have a professional network that's outside of your 9 to 5, setting, having a community there. And the main pushback that I get from people who are trying to understand this is, well, what's the difference between that and having like a group chat on messages or having a group meet?
Yeah.
Slack is just something that provides, a number of features that tend to be a bit more robust, and it helps keep things organized. And you can also have channels within the workspace. So for example, and this is a plug / pro tip at the same time, you can join the UXCU meetup group. You can follow us on Instagram, but you can also join our Slack community. So in our Slack community, you have your little chat profile, and then there's a channel for all of the members so that everyone can have one giant conversation. But then we have sub channels within the Slack workspace. So I have a channel for some of my previous classes, some of my previous students. I have channels with specific groups of people who are working on a project. So it really enables creativity, and bringing it back to events. I feel that having a Slack community is a really great foundation to build, any type of socialization infrastructure on top of. So if you're hosting events, using that as a marketing, channel, or using that as a way to get people involved in the planning of your event. So I think that having that sort of funnel where you have events and then Slack at the bottom, is a really effective way of managing your community in terms of, fostering the sense of community.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I use it as well. So I have this I have this meetup for data science, and it's grown tremendously through meetup.com. But like there's always this question, this nagging question in my mind, which is like, okay, so if people wanted to communicate peer to peer, so like person to person, but they're not at the event, right? So if it's a monthly event or a weekly event, and you want to talk to John, but you didn't get John's telephone number, you didn't have the foresight to exchange Instagram, whatever. That's where something like Slack community can also shine a lot, because you can just DM people through Slack, and I mean that's another really major appeal that I found personally.
Yeah, that's a good point, especially because one of my, one of the things that I'm not a big fan of meetups is their chat interface is a little wonky. It's not perfect yet. They're not
It's buggy.
buggy.
It's
They're not a
buggy.
platform. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, pushing that over to Slack is a good move.
Yeah. So there's this other, so you mentioned here that you also work for the Department of New York City Tourism, and that they have this effort for virtual events, listing virtual events. Could you maybe talk more about that, and how our listeners might be interested in attending virtual events listed by the Department of Tourism?
Yeah, so one of the reasons why I really enjoy what y'all are doing specifically is because, and as we spoke about before, a huge, piece of what it means to be a New Yorker, or what it means to experience New York, is to go to events. And it's such a big part of the city's pulse. or one of the biggest things that keeps the city's pulse going. So it's a huge part of our efforts at NYC and Company. So NYC and Company is the official DMO of New York City. So DMO is Domestic Marketing Organization. So basically every city more or less has a DMO, an entity that is working with that city's or the city's mayor's office or whatever it may be to help sell the city to, you know, the world, but also help people within that city experience the city itself. So for us, what that means is we have a website called nycgo.com, and that website is the official guide to New York City. And a part of that website is we have an events platform, but most recently, as you noted, we launched a part of that website that is now called Virtual NYC. So you can go to it by going to nycgo.com/virtual NYC. And we basically created a hub of virtual events, more or less. And we've categorized them out by outdoors and recreation, museums and galleries, attractions and tours, Broadway and other theater and nightlife, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's a really seamless experience, at least I'd like to think so. And that is the kind of work that I do, tying it back to UX.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, so like, did you design that web page? What exactly, what exactly did you do related to that project?
Yeah, it's a good, you know, full circle point. So so basically, working at NYC and Company, that's my day job. That's my 9 to 5. So that's what I dedicate most of the hours in the day to. So from 9 to 5, I am the UX strategy lead at NYC and Company, which basically is a way of saying that I help spearhead our user experience design efforts on this official guide, nycgo.com. So in this case, the latest project was this virtual NYC hub. So, you know, thinking about what are the ways that a user is going to experience this page, and how can we organize this page, and how can we break things out.
Was that catalyzed by Corona, or is that something that was already in the backlog and just happened to roll out recently?
It was definitely something that was inspired by everything that's happening, and
Okay.
by how we can help people continue to experience New York City, you know, while all of this is happening. And it kind of goes back to the points that we've been making throughout this conversation about events and, you know, how we can continue to push people to experience New York City, even from their homes. So yeah, it's something that definitely came about because of everything that's happening. But the cool thing about this is that we're seeing that this can be something that is of value beyond COVID-19. So even when things go back to, you know, normal in quotes, or a form of normal, should we be able to go back to some form of normal? The great thing is that I think that all of this virtualness is inspiring the ability to do more virtual things. And I really believe that, and from the conversation that we're having internally, I really believe that this platform will continue beyond COVID-19, and people will have, you know, the greater appetite to experience things virtually, because now they can more than they ever could before.
Yeah, I think that's really exciting. So, I mean, for me, so people that don't know, I'm a software engineer and I consider myself a technologist. So I really nerd out about what technology could be and what should it be. And you know, I don't think anyone would disagree with the sentiment that technology should make our lives better or make us happier if possible. And when I think about things like this virtual NYC directory or listing, it's sort of like a why not, right? So like it doesn't cost much to keep it up there. It seems like the effort is like we have to do it, right? So at some point someone has to decide, hey, let's do this and like let's launch it. And and so then and it's already been launched, and really it can just be there, and if people want to use it, great. If it falls out of fashion, then so be it. But that's what really excites me about technology, is that it's just sort of set it and forget it. And then as long as it's there, if someone comes along and wants to use it, then they should be able to use it. So that's I'm really happy that that's out. I actually need to check it out myself and give you my thoughts on it.
Yeah, and the cool thing about that is, just to vibe off of what you said for a second. So, in a way, this is another way that we can sell New York City to the world. So before, really you had to come here to experience, NYC to that extent, and now you could experience New York City, from whatever country you're at, and that could serve as an inspiration to get you to come here, obviously later down the line. So. But also, I wasn't entirely aware that you were a software engineer, so we might have to build something together.
Yeah, I'm the lead engineer and lead marketer for Litt. So
Nice.
um okay, yeah. So let's see. I think we touched on plenty of things. When people, so for the people listening, if they want to register for your events, where should they go, and how can people reach out to you?
Sure. Yeah. So if you want to join the UX Come Up, or if you're interested in UX, if you want to learn more about UX in general, definitely follow us on Instagram first. So Instagram.com/UX Come Up or at UX Come Up. That was the first time I've ever said the URL for an Instagram account of mine. I don't know why I did that.
HTTPS.
Yes, // www. But if you want to join our events, you would go to meetup.com/UX come up. In that case, that makes sense. And if you want to continue the conversation for any of the things that I talked about, if you're interested about UX, you want to talk to me about, whether it's a good fit for you, you can reach out to me personally on my Instagram page at Miguel Makes.
All right, sounds good. Thanks for taking time to be on the show, and thanks for speaking to our audience.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. This was awesome. And I love what y'all are doing. So kudos to y'all. Thank you so much, man.